Another aspect of the International Space Station that we had to address was commercial use of the station. Now, commercial use was always anticipated, but I think for the original partners in the program, when we spoke of commercial activities, we were thinking more of research on board the space station, using the microgravity environment to do experiments that would ultimately have commercial applications. The Russians wanted to bring in visiting crew. This was something that the original partners found very difficult to condone because the idea of having what was perhaps not nicely but called a tourist visiting the space station was not viewed as an appropriate commercial use. But for the Russians, there was nothing unusual about this, and it was a perfectly legitimate request. So we had to work our way through, well, what would the rules be if we were to have someone visit the station? And so we had to deal with, how do we make sure they're covered with an insurance policy? How do we make sure that they're trained so that they're no danger to themselves or the crew? What are they allowed to have access to? And what are the rules for communications? And out of that very first visit of Dennis Tito, which was quite a difficult conversation among all of the partners, we came up with a whole process for visiting crew. And now, when subsequent requests came, we had an established procedure that all of the partners understood and could work with. So we were able to work our way through these, but they were the expectations for the partners on what was commercial and what was not commercial and what you could do and what you couldn't do because of different cultures and different standards were things that hadn't been fully anticipated in the agreements and required then new agreements to be worked out in order for those to operate smoothly. So what we ended up with, instead of two distinct phases, development and assembly, and then utilization, we had an overlap between those two phases. That meant that for commercial users as well as research users, it wasn't clear when and how they could fully utilize the station. And there were delays in our ability to accommodate those things. And I don't think we had a full framework outline for exactly how we would do that. And part of it was because we had this overlap of the two phases, and we had to put full emphasis on development and assembly to establish the facility. But we also needed to utilize it, because if we weren't utilizing it, then where was the return on investment for the program? So there was more emphasis on development, delay in utilization, certainly utilization going on throughout, but not as much as originally anticipated, as early as anticipated. So as we look forward to future exploration programs, we really ought to be thinking about not only our own development and utilization plans for research purposes, but how do we want to incorporate commercial activities? We should build this in from the beginning. And we really have a different environment now, because we have cargo resupply by commercial suppliers. We're looking at crew as a commercial element for the space station in the future. And so I think we have a very different outlook, a different environment to work with, and it's going to be even more important to build in what is that commercial element for the program initially, as well as how are we paving the way for future commercial activities that may follow the initial government investment and development.